What's going on, guys? I actually had no idea I was going to be making this video today, but as I sat down, was enjoying my cup of coffee, checked my YouTube feed, and Nintendo made their announcement for the new upcoming Nintendo Switch. So in this video, we're going to be checking out this new Nintendo Switch and see what it all has to offer, see what kind of specs we have available, and more stuff like that. So the wait and predictions is finally over. I would say for most people. I'm sure, and I've already seen some people are still expecting or predicting a Switch Pro in the near future, maybe next year, stuff like that. But in most people's cases that have kind of been following the Nintendo Switch and seeing when this revision was going to come along, I think this is the Switch, and a lot of us agree that this is the revision that we're going to see for a little while before we see anything else. So this is it, guys. This is the new Nintendo Switch. They're calling it the OLED model, and as you can see, we're on Nintendo's official website. And with this release, as we can see and what we know so far right off the bat, we don't have any kind of performance boost per se. They're more like cosmetic upgrades overall. As you can see, this is the OLED model, they're calling it. So we do have the presence of a new display in handheld mode, obviously. Slimmer bezels, and it is a OLED display. I think a lot of these upgrades are going to be a little bit more geared towards the handheld users, and definitely being the OLED display is a big factor in that. So definitely the biggest talking point of this is going to be that 7-inch OLED display, which I got a couple kind of questions on it. One, I don't know if this device is actually the same identical size as the Nintendo Switch we have right now, or if it's any wider. If I had to guess, I would say it is the same exact size as our current Nintendo Switch, but they were just able to shrink the bezels on it and just put that screen in the current real estate that is on this device. But I don't know that for sure, and nobody's really mentioned anything about that. But because I think the current Switch, the actual display is a 6.2-inch display, but I'm guessing they just squeezed the 7-inch display inside the same surface area, but they're able to get it done with just those smaller bezels. That's my prediction. So this is actually pretty interesting, and I didn't want to get too technical with it, but I actually just measured the screen on my Nintendo Switch. So our whole screen piece in the actual device itself, minus the Joy-Cons, is almost 7 inches. It's really close to 7 inches in total. The actual measurement from the screen size, the actual screen size, including the bezels, is 6.2. So that's where they're getting the measurement on our current Nintendo Switch. But the actual screen we view and game from is actually only 5.5 inches. So it looks like this thing might be slightly wider, because for the screen to be 7 inches, and there is going to be some sort of, obviously sides to the device, because there needs to be that room for the Joy-Con electronics on the inside. So I'm curious to see how this thing is in person. I think it will be slightly wider. It might be just very slight, though. I can't imagine it'd be much wider, because the handheld experience just wouldn't be as good. I mean, we can't be gaming on something like, crazy. So yeah, I think it'll be very slight, if anything. But they actually measuring this all out now, they really can't fit a 7-inch display inside this real estate here. So that's pretty interesting. I'm curious to see what this thing looks like in person. Another pretty notable upgrade is the 64 gigs of internal storage. So a standard Nintendo Switch like this comes with 32. So 64 is a good upgrade, because 32, even though Nintendo tries to keep the game file sizes pretty small, 32 gets used up very quick. And I don't know if that includes the actual OS on the Switch, even though it's very lightweight. But 64 is a pretty substantial upgrade, and you can definitely fit a few games on that. So another key detail is the adjustable kickstand, which actually takes up the whole width of the console in this case, opposed to the previous Switch, as as most of you probably know, it's just this small little kickstand on the side here. So that's pretty cool. And this is another kind of key point that's really, this revision is kind of catering towards the undocked mode. You know, whether you're playing handheld or you are playing, you know, local multiplayer or just with the Switch sitting on a desk without being docked, they're kind of catering this Switch to the undocked mode from the looks of it. Something very strange to see from Nintendo is the built-in wired LAN port. I'm a huge fan of this. I think this is a really awesome addition to the Switch, because in many cases it is nice if you have the ability to wire your console. Connectivity is going to be a lot better opposed to downloading everything and playing online through wireless. So that's a nice feature to have if you do have your dock somewhere close to where you can plug into LAN. That's great. You can do it now currently with a USB 2.0 to LAN adapter, but it's nice that they just have this one on board. Like we mentioned, 64 gigs of internal storage right off the bat, which is really nice. Enhanced audio. I never thought the Switch audio was that poor. I thought it was fairly decent, but they obviously put in some kind of new speakers that maybe the clarity's a bit better or the volume's a bit higher on them. So we are working with the same Joy-Cons of the previous Nintendo Switch, which we all kind of expected because a Joy-Con redesign would really throw a lot of things off. And it does come in two different colors. We have the white Joy-Cons and white dock. And then we have the standard neon Joy-Cons with the black dock. So those are the color options that we'll be getting. And current, like I mentioned, current Joy-Cons, current Pro controllers, all that stuff is going to be compatible with this Nintendo Switch. Now, if you do have a case for your current Nintendo Switch, or screen protectors, stuff like that, I don't know if it'll be compatible with this new one. Obviously, the screen's a lot different, but we don't know the actual size of the device. That made me think of it seeing this case here, so I don't know if you have a case for your Nintendo Switch if it's going to fit. So from the looks of it right now, it looks like they are just going to add this to the Nintendo Switch product stack as their premium option. And that's definitely kind of the vibes I've gotten from, you know, the whole device announcement. Is it's a lot sleeker looking as far as the, obviously the OLED display, the dock. So this is kind of your premium option if you're shopping for a Nintendo Switch. And it looks like they're going to keep the current Nintendo Switch in the product lineup. And obviously we do have the Switch Lite for those people that, you know, are looking for something in that price point and don't mind just having the handheld variant without being able to dock it and play like a normal console. The price point, I think a lot of people expected this one to just boot out the current Nintendo Switch and be the same price. But in this case, they're keeping this one at the $299 price point, and they're adding the OLED Nintendo Switch at $349.99. I think as far as who this device is for, I think it's a, you know, at the price point, I think it would be a really good device to pick up for somebody that doesn't have a Nintendo Switch. I would probably go for the OLED variant versus the regular or Switch Lite, but it really depends on your, you know, play style and preference. The $50 upcharge going from the regular to the OLED is probably worth it, I would imagine. But on the other hand, for somebody that already has a regular Nintendo Switch like myself, the upgrade, unless you are playing in handheld all the time and you really get a lot of use out of the screen that's actually on the Nintendo Switch, it's probably not worth the upgrade, even though it looks like a very nice device and I like how sleek everything looks as far as the display and the dock goes. To upgrade your Nintendo Switch to this one, it probably, I'd say it probably isn't worth it. So I think this is a really cool revision to the Nintendo Switch, and it kind of presents itself that the Switch is going to be a platform that Nintendo is going to be supporting for a long time up and coming, I really feel like. And I think some other people have mentioned that as well, and I'm very happy about that. I think the Switch is a phenomenal platform. Even though I'm really happy to see this Nintendo Switch revision coming to light, we're going to kind of talk about the elephant in the room, and I think that is I think a lot of people are going to be a little bit disappointed, and mostly because of the supposed leaks and rumors that everybody was talking about, and how Nintendo was working on a console that had, a much higher output, like 4K at higher frame rates and stuff like that. I think a lot of people really expected this to be the Switch Pro, but unfortunately, this isn't that crazy performance upgrade in this thing that we were thinking is called the Switch Pro. So for the resolution on the current Switch and this Nintendo Switch, the OLED variant, we have a 720p output when in handheld mode, and in docked we have the 1080p output resolution. And in the new Nintendo Switch, the OLED model, we're not seeing any sort of 4K output when docked or anything like that. It's basically going to have the same output resolution both in handheld and in docked mode as we have on the current Nintendo Switch. And proving that is the other reports I've looked at on this announcement. The Nintendo Switch OLED version does have the same hardware that the current Nintendo Switch has, being the same Morrico chip, the same amount of RAM and stuff like that. But I definitely still have some questions on this announcement. A couple of them being, one, I'd like to know what kind of HDMI port they are using in the dock of this Nintendo Switch, because the previous version, or the current version that we have, I think it's only an HDMI 1 port. I don't think it is in the HDMI 2.0 category. So I'd be curious to know what HDMI this dock has. And the dock has gone through quite a bit of changes from the looks of this OLED variant. I mean, we've talked about the LAN port they added. It did take out one USB port. And something else a lot of people mentioned was the ventilation, as there was a little bit of, you could see some perforations on the back side of it where it looks like they added some extra cooling. So this dock is quite a bit different, so I'd be curious to know what kind of HDMI port is in there, and I'm sure we'll hear more about that once we get closer to the release of this Nintendo Switch. It happens to be October 8th. I would say one extremely positive thing that I'm predicting with the Nintendo Switch OLED version not having the 4K output that a lot of people had hoped for when docked, and big performance upgrades, is I think availability will be a lot better opposed to if it did have a 4K output display, because not having this crazy performance upgrade and most of the benefits being in handheld mode, for a lot of users like myself who mostly play docked, I think most of those people probably aren't going to upgrade, and most of the market is going to be people just getting into the Nintendo Switch, possibly purchasing this one, and then people that mostly play their Nintendo Switch in handheld mode upgrading to the OLED version. As of late last year, and obviously in this year, availability is a huge factor in the consumer market for electronics and in the gaming industry, so that's a big point to any new console release now. PS5 and Xbox Series X and S are still really hard to come by from what I've seen. And I don't know if the Switch is going to be in that same category. The standard Nintendo Switch is still pretty available from what I've seen, and the Switch Lite. So this one, it might be a little hard to get your hands on at launch, but I definitely think not having the insane performance upgrades from the current Nintendo Switch will definitely help its availability out. That's going to wrap up this video, guys. Hopefully you enjoyed it. Hopefully it gave you some pretty solid information on what we know about the Nintendo Switch OLED model, as they're calling it. I gotta say, a lot of people might not be super stoked about this revision of the Nintendo Switch not having some of the reported specs that articles like Bloomberg had posted and stuff like that, but I think this is a really good revision, and it kind of has me believing that the health of the platform is really good, and that the Nintendo Switch is going to be around for many more years, with slight hardware revisions every 2 to 3 years, or some sort of span like that, which has me very happy because I love the Switch platform. It's kind of crazy too, because on my video list I did have a video I was thinking about making, talking about whether or not it is a good time to purchase a Nintendo Switch before seeing this announcement of the brand new Nintendo Switch OLED model. I would say now is probably the best time to buy a Nintendo Switch if you haven't gotten into the platform of Nintendo Switch. Knowing that we have all the options out on the table, we're not really waiting for any new release aside from the October 8th release of the OLED model. So everything's out there and on the table. There's nothing around the corner that is unexpected at this point. So I'd say that makes it a really good time to buy a Nintendo Switch if you think the regular variant would be the best for you, or if you want to wait and scoop up the OLED model. We know it's out there and coming very soon. If you guys enjoyed the video, make sure to drop a like on it, and if you want to see more tech related videos like this one, be sure to subscribe. As always guys, thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.